Welcome to the Future of Luxury podcast, where we explore the cutting edge of the luxury industry with the world's leading authority, Dr. Daniel Langer. Dr. Langer is the founder and CEO of Hecate Brands, the world's leading brand strategy and activation firm, and professor of luxury at Pepperdine University. Join us as we dive into the trends shaping the future of luxury, from millennial and Gen Z influence to digital disruption. With unique perspectives shared from the world's most knowledgeable experts in the field. Brought to you by Hecate Intelligence, the global leader in luxury strategy and brand innovation. This podcast is your backstage pass to the world of extreme value creation and luxury's next big moves. So without further ado, Dr. Daniel Langer.
So it's my huge pleasure and privilege to introduce my two podcast guests today, Damian Maib and Thomas Derksen, aka Fu. And as we said in the intro, we will speak about the massive changes that happened here in China over the last couple of years when it pertains to social media, when it pertains to e-commerce. And I could not have had better guests than the two of you to discuss this. Maybe if both of you give us a little bit of an introduction of what you do, and then we go a little bit more into the topics.
Yeah, thank you so much, Daniel, for inviting us, and I hope everyone can bear with our German English, because our own podcast, most of the time we do it in German, but also do it sometimes in English. So my name is Thomas Derksen, as you said, also known as AFU in my Chinese social media. That's what I mainly did for the last 9 years now, almost already. So I'm a YouTuber, so a social media influencer. I started doing it in 2016 and did a lot of videos about culture, about travel, about lifestyle in Germany. And now I have my own media production company, and I do the social media, I do the podcast with Damian, and also we do events, we do workshops, we do speeches, we publish books, everything related to social media.
Wonderful.
Perfect. Yeah, likewise. Thank you for having me, Daniel. Our pleasure to be here. Thank you for coming over here in Shanghai. My name is Damian Maib. I'm also German, so same German accent today for your listeners.
We're three.
Three, exactly. Exactly.
Didn't have my accent.
You know what I'm doing here now? Today we're sitting in my office. My company is called Genuine. I myself founded it in 2016. We do help international brands to sell in China, mostly online, and then we connect that with social media marketing. Mm-hmm. So we always connect social with e-commerce, and that was a lot of traditional commerce in the past, and now it's a lot of social commerce, which we might touch upon later. And here in Shanghai, we have now over 100 employees. We've also got other offices in Guangzhou and in Europe, but that's basically what we do, e-commerce and social media marketing in China.
Wonderful. And I think this is, I think the topic that we are discussing today couldn't be more relevant in today's world. We are entering now 2025, and when we look into how the luxury market has been developing, we are in a quite historic moment at the time. A couple of weeks ago, the latest Bain study was published, and the Bain study indicates that for 2024, there's an expectation of a decline of the luxury market, which is actually quite historical moment, because 2024 on a global scale has not been a crisis year. And the last two times where the market was declining was in 2009 after the financial crisis, and in 2020 when there were lockdowns because of COVID. And then, as everyone on this podcast knows very well, after COVID, there was a huge surge in sales. Actually, we had a historic growth phase. 2020 to 2023, we had a CAGR in the market of 22%. 22%. And I was flabbergasted that everyone, seemingly just took these numbers and kind of said, this is normal, a growth of 22%. But it's not. It's kind of a bubble growth. No one can expect that a market that had a historical CAGR of 6%, and now is going from 6 to 22%, that this is going to be something that is going to be there forever. And so 2024, somehow many brands were surprised to see that there is a change in customer behavior. And therefore, I want to go a little bit deeper with you in today in unfolding a little bit the root causes of this. But what the Bayer study indicated was that there is a trust issue right now. And the trust issue can be compressed into a few topics. One topic is that customers now, and this never was seen in any previous of these studies, think that I think it was around 50% of customers think luxury brands are overpriced. Then they think that they don't really understand, or the feedback that they don't really understand the brand stories behind it. The brand DNA is unclear. I sometimes call it the sea of sameness. So they basically, we've seen this now in data, what I've been saying over the last couple of years. And the third thing is a lack of wow, a lack of inspiration. So we have a trust issue. We have an issue that brands are not differentiating, and then they're not inspiring customers. And I think this is an incredible segue to what you guys are doing, because, with an e-commerce platform, as you said, with social selling, for you, with your large following on social media channels, what you guys are doing is all about inspiration. It's all about, getting customers to connect with brands and to inspire them, and to make them care about what you do. And somehow the brands, when we look into the results of the Bain study, at least to a large extent of customers lost that ability to inspire. So you guys are the ones that do this every day. And the luxury industry right now is facing this crisis where they don't really know how to do it, or they lost they lost a little bit the mojo on that. The other thing where I think is so relevant that we discussed this today is also the context where we are in Shanghai. China has been, for the last 20 years, the growth engine for the luxury industry worldwide, which also is easily forgotten, because right now everyone speaks about crisis in China, and I have to say I only arrived here yesterday afternoon, and at least what I could see from my discussions I had so far, from my first impressions, traveling here, and our previous discussion and so on. Yes, there is shifts in behaviors, but I don't see crisis. And so I think what I want to do today in our discussion is to dissect all these topics a little bit and to go a little bit deeper, but also to basically maybe challenge a couple of assumptions on that market. And I think for you guys as foreigners living in China, as people who know different cultures, very well the culture outside of China, very well the culture in China. You're working with brands that are very often European brands, that are trying to establish themselves here or to become more successful here. So you have insights, I think, into that market that almost no one else has in that magnitude. So maybe let's start with the first question, or the first topic of our discussion. How do you see right now the luxury market in China? And also, if you observe the last maybe 3-4 years, how do you see the change in the market?
Yeah, maybe I do the start and then Thomas adds onto that. I think in the last couple of years, especially last 5 years, COVID started, right? I think that was the first year when educated, wealthy Chinese consumers did not have the chance to travel abroad for the luxury shopping, which is otherwise usually common practice to do so. So that has really driven the demand of luxury of luxury goods and luxury sales here in China, be it online and offline. Of course, offline even more so, because more of the luxury goods, especially the super brands and that we've been talking about, right? The Birkins and so on and so forth. That is nothing you do online, of course. So it's offline here, and the prices in China are usually higher than in the home market. So that adds probably to this revenue growth that the industry has seen. So China was growing, and at the same time, products have been sold for higher prices than what it was before. So there was no chance to leave basically for 2 years, right? And then once the Chinese market opened up again, so that everyone who was here could travel again, foreigners could come back and Chinese could leave, I think the growth within the market has stagnated a little bit. And what we are seeing very recently is that due to maybe exchange rates of other nearby countries like Japan, some of the shifts go there. If I can take from Shanghai 1.5, 2 hours flight, I'm in Osaka, Kyoto, or Tokyo, I can buy my luxury goods there. It's cheaper, exchange rate is better, and I get my tax back, right? I think there's a couple of luxury consumers who definitely do this calculation. They do that math, and that means that we are seeing a decline maybe in revenues from the sales within China. But does that mean that the Chinese customer is spending less as such? I don't think so. I think that just the purchases are happening in different locations, right? And all about wow effects and social media. I see here in Shanghai, we have super luxury malls, a lot of them, and brands are investing a lot in building their brand. We have a lot of nice corporations. We do see a lot of pop-ups. We do see some wow effects in terms of branding and collaborations or PR stunts, yeah. And maybe Thomas, as a social media celebrity in China with more than 10 million followers, maybe you can tell us your perspective. I'm talking from the agency side, but what is your feeling?
So neither professional nor private, I am a luxury expert, but I think you mentioned some really interesting points why these brands face challenges, not just in China, but all over the world. In my opinion, it's the same problem with politicians or brands or like even luxury or other brands, that the people or the customer or the voters, they have the feeling that we don't speak the same language anymore. That's what you said. It's a big problem. It's a big challenge for them because the two things that interest me the most, the number one thing is social media. Social media has become so important that no brand, no person, no celebrity or no private person can't ignore it anymore. But sometimes I have the feelings that a lot of brands, a lot of boards, members of boards, they don't understand social media, how important social media is for people in general, but people in China in particular. Because we like 50 or 60% of Chinese internet users are considered influencers. They're not big influencers. They don't have 10 million followers like I do, but they are micro-influencers. They are influencing the people around you. And if you go to the Chinese apps, you see people love to write about their shopping experiences. People love to write about their dining experiences. People love to write about their trip to Disneyland. So everyone in China, like, is an influencer, and you have to take care of them. You have to speak their language because their vote and their voice counts. The second one is China. A lot of people, a lot of brands don't have an idea what is happening here in China. That's why we started our podcast. We wanted to tell the people we are here, we are in Shanghai, we are close to the Bund. We live here, we work here, we know, or at least we think we know what's happening here, and we want to share our experience, we want to share our expertise. But people in Europe, people in the US and companies, a lot of them, they have no idea what's going on in China. And the worst thing is they're not even interested. They think, we go with our European or American Western approach to come to China and it will work here, but it doesn't. Like Damian, he sees so many brands and customers who come here with a European attitude and they will fail because China is a huge market with its own rules. And the biggest problem is, or the biggest challenge for Europe and the West will be in future, that the other way around, Chinese people, Chinese brands, Chinese companies are hugely interested in what's going on in Silicon Valley, what's going on in London, what's going on in Frankfurt, and they send their people there. They open new shops, they open like research centers, and they really are curious about what's happening here. When I go back to Germany, nobody's curious about what's happening in China, but the future is happening here right now in China and in whole of Asia. And at the same time, the amount of people learning Chinese in Europe and Germany is declining. This is like crazy. It's like we are committing suicide in one way or another. That's my point.
Yeah. We're taking a quick break from this podcast with a short message of our sponsor, Equity Intelligence. The luxury market is changing faster than ever before. Hyper competition is in practically every category, and customers' expectations are at all-time high. So there is no room for complacency. And this is why we created Equity Intelligence. It's an innovative training platform that allows you to redefine success in luxury. It's created both for individuals and for companies, and it provides profound insights from the psychology of luxury customers into how to manage brands in a more profound way, and also how to create customer experiences. We also analyze trends, we analyze things that work extremely well, and we also look into pitfalls so that you can avoid those. Join Equity Intelligence today. And now let's get back to our podcast. But before we go back, I also want to encourage you to share the podcast with your colleagues or with everyone that is interested in luxury. Thank you so much, and let's enjoy the rest of the show. It's fascinating what you both were saying. Maybe I start, Damian, with a couple of things that you said, and I think I really liked how you dissected why this market was growing so strongly, and this is also something where I'm always flabbergasted sometimes how kind of short-lived memories. Because yes, of course, it was a very, very, I would say, unusual time when we look at 2020, 2021, and 2022, frankly. Also, I think it was only end of 22, if I remember well, or even 23 beginning, when the zero COVID policy was lifted. So this means that there were, we had quarantines in place. Yes, people could travel, but then if you came back, you had to spend a few weeks in isolation, which, I know a couple of people who had to go through that. And the report back was always, this is quite devastating. You have to be like, for extended period of time in a hotel room and you cannot go out. So yes, people who didn't have to travel didn't travel. So, and this has now two effects. The first effect was there was disposable income that otherwise would have been spent on travel that was now spent on hard luxury goods. So if you basically now maybe take an average trip from, of a couple to Europe, let's say two people buying a business class ticket, staying in a nice hotel, then you have the food, you have a couple of other things, maybe some purchases. This could be easily a $15,000 trip. So this $15,000 now were redirected into hard luxury purchases. And who profited, for example, was the watch industry to some extent, the jewelry industry, also the fashion industry. It's very natural. Everything else would be shocking that once people can travel again, that now there's not a redirection again from these budgets into travel budgets. And we see this. The hospitality market is growing very strongly, and the hard luxury markets are declining. So I think I really like that because it shows how important it is to look at the context. And I like also, Thomas, what you were saying, that we don't speak the same language anymore, that somehow there is almost that we are lost in translation between maybe even the generations. And I think one thing that many underestimate, at least, many discussions I have with brands, is also how young and how digital the Chinese market is. And, you both are perfectly, in the center of it. Maybe speak a little bit about the daily life. Thomas, you already spoke a bit about that everyone is an influencer. Everyone basically is their own basically everyone is their own brand. And this, of course, has dramatic influences. Maybe tell us a little bit of how the digital world of a Chinese person or the person living in China looks like. Maybe from the moment you get up in the morning until the evening, and maybe an average day when you go to work or so. How do you use apps? How do you get your information? How much digital is the life here? If you compare this, for example, with Europe or with the US.
So let me tell you a little story. I went a couple of months ago. I went to the gym and I put my phone on the floor and I did the workout, and then the dumbbell fell from the bench onto my phone. It was like a 25 kilograms, and my phone was dead immediately. It was dead.
End of life.
End of my life. I was panicking. Like, how can I survive this day? Because we had like a meeting here in the office. It was like 11 in the morning. I had to be in the office at 1 o'clock. So now I said, okay, I have 2 hours to solve this problem, because it is a huge problem. The one thing, I had to go back from the gym to my home. I either need a taxi or I need a bike, a shared bike. For both of them, I need an app. You almost cannot get a taxi anymore without the app, because everyone books it through the apps. I cannot get a car, a bicycle without my app. Then I have to buy a new phone, because I need a backup phone, right? So how should I get a new phone without paying? Because there's no possibility anymore to pay cash in China. Maybe like the small shops, you can go there. But if I go to an Apple store or to a shop that sells mobile phones, nobody will accept cash. And also I have to go to the bank to get cash. This is like a huge hustle for me. So I talked to friends and I was like, how should I connect to my friends? I don't have any phone numbers. I don't have a phone at home. Like Festnetz, as you say in German, right?
Yeah.
So this was like a huge problem to me. The one good thing is, like, I was still logged on my WeChat on my computer, so I could use it to communicate and get a phone from a friend of mine, and then set it up again. So in China, everything from the morning you wake up to the evening, it's all digitalized. A lot of shops, they don't even use cash anymore. They don't accept cash anymore. And we have these super apps here in China. It's like WeChat and Alipay, Meituan. With these apps, you can do everything you need in life. You can pay your electricity bill. You can do shopping. You can make deliveries with your like if you have parcels you want to send out, then you can order food. You can play games, you can transfer money, you can send messages, you can book your flights, you can do everything you want and everything you need to. And everyone does it. Everyone, even like the beggars on the streets, if you don't have any cash, they have a QR code where you can scan the QR code and give them a donation. So this is the huge difference to Germany, for example, that 99% of the customers and 99% of the merchants, they accept WeChat and Alipay, and this makes things and life very, very easy. But also the risk if your phone dies, runs out of battery, or it gets hit by a dumbbell, then you are in a panic mode.
Yeah. This is. I think. Thank you for sharing that story. I think that's really impressive, and that shows how, in a sense, on one hand, how much digital has basically, let's say, infiltrated our lives in a way, and all these, wonderful inventions and apps that make our lives so easy and everything accessible all the time. But at the same time, also shows that how different life is here than in so many other regions.
And one more thing, as you mentioned, apps. Actually, apps are also outdated already in China. So, because before it was like, oh, I have to develop an app. I have to get some developers, some engineers who do it for me. I have to spend a lot of money. Now WeChat has its own ecosystem called mini programs. Mm-hmm. So a lot of, for example, I use ClassPass as an app for go to different gyms. And they don't even have an app in the Chinese App Store. They have a mini program on WeChat, which is a very light version of an app. And WeChat gives you the ecosystem, and then they exchange the data of the customers, and it's very easy and very little investment and very easy to use for me as a user to just open WeChat. I have all my mini programs I need. If I want to order my coffee, if I want to buy a gym class on ClassPass, I can do it there, and it's much more easier and much more cheaper to get your customers than it was before when you had someone to develop an app for you, just for you.
Yeah, I love that. And it shows now that I think from anyone who wants to, manages a Western brand and wants to be successful in China, just looking at what you described, your life that is happening mainly online, it means that any Western company wanting to be successful in China has to think that way. They have to put the customer in the center and think basically almost like in an ecosystem way around the customer, how the customer interacts digitally, and then be there. And I can only tell you, from the projects that we are doing with brands, and we have a lot of clients in Asia, but of course, if you think about the traditional luxury market, many brands are either in Europe or in the US. I see still a lot of product centricity overall. Companies are excellent in product, but I don't see so much this, I would say, radically digital thinking of a digital ecosystem and so on. And maybe, Damian, that brings me to you and your service in your company as a e-com provider, but also, as you said, with social extensions. Tell us a little bit about how you see the world, how the world has evolved, and how e-commerce actually works right now in China.
Yeah, thank you. Very good question. Basically, and the reason why our company exists is, first of all, that in China, everything is different compared to what we see in Europe or the US, right? We don't have Instagram, we don't have Facebook, so Meta, everything is blocked, no YouTube, but we have these apps and we have these services, but they're just entirely exclusively Chinese, from Chinese company in Chinese language with no English version, right? So it's very difficult for international brands and companies to understand this market if they don't speak Chinese, and the most Western executives don't speak Chinese. So that's why we exist, and we help brands to basically navigate through this maze and this ecosystem of speed, right? What we discussed prior to our podcast today. And what we see here is that social media and e-commerce has now really become one. Yeah, the thing was that mobile first we've been talking about in the US and in Europe for a long time, but actually in China it's always been mobile only. There's never mobile first. There was no option. So we're always mobile only. And a lot of times we get sometimes questions from the executive team, or they looked at the Tmall shop or in this program and they say, oh, how does it look? Where is it? Right? And we say, there is none. Yeah, and open your app. And then you see it looks beautiful. Open your desktop. No one is using that. No one is doing that. So we are not designing anything for desktop anymore. We do it exclusively for mobile. That's the first thing, which is really different. And the other thing now is that in China since 2020, we've actually seeing that social commerce has been rising at an incredible speed, and that means TikTok. TikTok, and then also Little Red Book. So TikTok, everyone knows, of course. It's a Chinese company by ByteDance. Here in China, it's called Douyin, and in the rest of the world, it's called TikTok. So everyone knows that. And then we have our Little Red Book, which is basically similar to Instagram. So on all of these platforms, they now basically ramped up their game on e-commerce. So on TikTok in 2020, around 2020 summer, it was the first time when we have seen that TikTok was blocking the direction to other e-commerce platforms, for example, Tmall from Alibaba. I would say that you could compare to Amazon, but it's a little bit more powerful in terms of features compared to Amazon. So here they blocked the direct links, so you could not do a video or a live stream anymore, directing the traffic to other platforms, but they kept it all in their own ecosystem. So they really built up their own social commerce function. And now, 4 years, not even 5 years fast forward, we see that social commerce now owns 20% of the entire e-commerce market, goes to apps like TikTok, like Kuaishou, which is also a little bit like TikTok, like Little Red Book, and other platforms, and sometimes also even WeChat. Yeah, so these platforms, there's an incredible shift. In 2019, we see that Alibaba still had around 65-70% share in the e-commerce segment. Today, it's 40. 24 Tmall, 24 Taobao, which both belong together. So the majority has been really shifting to social commerce. And we do see and we do believe that that will happen now in the Western countries as well, right? In the US, you do have TikTok Shop already. In the UK, you have it too. In Europe, they started now with Spain. Other countries will follow. So here in China, I believe we really kind of live in the future of e-commerce and social media marketing. And everything here happens at supersonic speed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the speed of change is impressive, and even what you just said and the numbers you were sharing, the decline of shares in commerce of platforms like Alibaba, and I remember now, if I look at my own career, I think around, and I may be now directionally wrong in the precise year, but I would say around maybe 2012, 13, we started talking, I would say, at scale about Alibaba. So it's maybe we speak about 10 years from today, when at least on a global scale, people started to notice Alibaba. And so it's a relatively new platform if you think on the grand scheme of things. And now we're in 2025, and you were just mentioning, in the last 4 or 5 years, their share in commerce goes down, and the social commerce is growing, and basically replacing that share, and then the warp speed, and that basically really shows that I think a lot of Western companies in their mindset are probably still thinking, if they think anything at all already about those channels, they may think Alibaba, but already the market here moved to social commerce. And the speed of change is just incredible. So I think navigating those is pretty difficult. I think also what you said before is very important, and I wanted to touch on that. You said that you observe Chinese companies being very focused on what happens outside of China, and from your observation, and I share that observation, many Western companies are not so interested in what is happening. I don't want to say interested, but maybe don't have the visibility, don't have the understanding. Also, what you said, because the platforms are very focused on the Chinese market, they're in Chinese. Many Western managers don't understand what is said. So how do you see that, and how do you see also now dealing with your large following? How do you see the companies reacting, and what would you recommend companies to do at this moment?
The color change of the microphone, does it still record from red to blue?
Yeah, it looks, yeah, it does. Yeah. So it's a very, very good and interesting question. Also, change and transformation are like two topics I'm really interested in my professional and private life. It's always here in China, you have the feeling that you are part of history that is happening right now. And it's when I go back to Germany, sometimes I have the feeling I go back 5 years in time as soon as I land at Frankfurt Airport. So and also it's not to say that Western or European German companies are not interested in the Chinese market, but they still just mainly see it as a consumer market, so where we want to sell our products. But on the other hand, China now became a country where you can get inspiration from. That's like Silicon Valley, for example, is really paying attention to what's happening in China, not to sell our products to the Chinese market, but to get inspiration from the Chinese technology giants and from the developers here in China. Because the super apps, for example, I just mentioned, they are something that Google or Meta or whoever, they're really interested in, and they want to do something similar in the West, which is not very easy because there are also cultural differences in China and the West. But the one point you mentioned is very, very important. When I want to buy a car in Germany, for example, I go to a seller or to a reseller, and I can see 150 or 200 cars there, and then a guy is coming to me and telling me this car is good or this car is good, and I buy the car. So it's a car sale. But in China, when I walk down the streets in Shanghai, I go to Xintiandi, very close to here, and I don't go to a car seller, I go to a NIO or BYD experience center. So they want to give me an experience and not to sell a car to me. And this doesn't stop after you get the car. You go there, you have a nice coffee, and they show you around. They show you what you can do with this car. And then you also have merchandise of the car. But then you actually will become part of the community. So after you bought this car, NIO will always reach out to you every month. They will send you messages. You have your own customer experience manager. You have your own contacts at NIO. You have your own community. NIO owners will do rides together. They will be part of the community. They will get updates. They will get new software. Even like I, as a social media influencer, I did a live stream with a car company a month ago, and they also invited real users to be part of this live stream, so they can give real-time feedback to other users who watch this live stream. So it's like my community is watching a live stream where I as a customer can be part of, and I can see that the company, they value me as a customer and they value my opinion, right? So that's a huge difference to Germany where you say like, it's like product number one, but here it's like customer number one. And if I have a happy customer, he may become my lifetime customer and he will always be a friend of mine. And that's how they call them. They are friends of my company. We speak the same language. We hear you. We want to have your opinion. We want to get better together. So then you as a customer, you have the feeling, oh, I have some kind of shares in the company because they listen to me. They want to know what my opinion is. And maybe with the next software update, I can see that my opinion really mattered and they improved this or that in the car or in the software.
I love this example, and you know it could not be in a sense more timely from experience that I had just a few days ago. So a few days ago, we bought for my wife a car, and that experience was, and it's a luxury car. I can say it's a BMW, and I would say everything about that experience was awful to buy it. And we bought it in the US. We spent, I think, 6 hours at the dealership. And I was impressed when you said, they offer you coffee when you come in. I had to go to the car dealer, asked me if I wanted the coffee. I said yes. And he said the coffee machine is around the corner.
Crazy.
Yeah, and then I thought, okay, what do you want to tell me with that? And then he continued the conversation. And I said, okay, wait a minute. So you want me to get up and go around the corner to get the machine? Yeah, if you want a coffee, there's the machine. And then it was like in a paper cup. The coffee was tasting awful. It's just a small example of the ordeal. So we are absolutely happy about the car. The dealership experience was awful. The car I drive is a Porsche 911. It's the worst dealership experience that I can even imagine. They couldn't care less about the customer. And I say this with all the love for the brand and for the car, but the dealership experience is just awful every single time. The car just told me, before I flew to Shanghai, on the way to the airport, I saw I have to go to the service. They said next service is due, and then I was just thinking, I don't even want to call them. I don't even want to drive it to the dealership, because I already know that everything in that experience is going to, I will lose time. There will be nothing. There's no inspiration. We speak about a $200,000 car. And I think this is, to me, one of the things that you also mentioned in our previous conversation when, I asked you about tell me about luxury car experience, and you spoke about a Chinese brand. Maybe tell us quickly about that, because I was so impressed by what you said. And then I was thinking, wow, I'm not even aware of any experience outside of China, not only in the car industry, but in some other brands that come even close to what you described.
So you asked us about our latest wow moment, because this is what is important to make a customer happy, that you go there and wow. And we have been on a book tour last year, and we went to Huawei headquarters in Shenzhen. And this was one of the few times last year where we both had a wow experience, because we could see like how innovative this company is, how they use technology to make lives better, to improve all the living standards of a lot of people, to make the life more safe, and also the cars. And even like for Huawei, cars are not their main business. It's just their business is doing software. But nowadays, software is so important for cars that if you don't have a good software, you cannot have a good car anymore. And that's like when you just today you sat in the Chinese car, you see the huge screens, you see all the software they're doing, and this is like their main focus. And this is what made me really wow, like this is how a car can be. And then you go and sit in a German car or a car of another, and then you said, okay, it's a very reliable car, but it will never make you think wow. You also thought wow when you were at Huawei, right, Damian?
Yeah, and that's funny because so my wife is driving a new ES8 Founder Edition, so one of the first 10,000 cars. So we have some privilege treatment and have some perks and so on and so forth. And every time we went charging the car, we went to that Neo box, right? They put the car there. And my first wow moment was like this 4 or 5 years ago, right? Where we just press a button and the steering wheel turns itself. It drives in this box. I remain seated in the car. And within 3 minutes, the battery gets taken out, a new one gets taken, and then we continue driving, right? That was my first wow experience. And I've done some videos, sent it to my family and friends, said, hey guys, what the fuck, right? And then and the next one was now when we've been in Shenzhen, because the cars, the design, the quality, the luxury, yeah? At the back seat, you can fully fledge it like in business class in an airline. You press a button, a screen will come down from the top with a projector from behind to watch movies, and for a price of what? $75,000. Yeah, and then there was a delegation of other German businessmen, all high C-level executives, and you could see it that they couldn't close their mouths. They said, and we said, hey, let's bring it to Germany. Let's make some money. Yeah, see, the other half said, no, please don't. We don't want to die too early, right? We don't want to crash our own car industry too badly. But the German car industries, they know it too, right? They now, after COVID, they came here, they've seen it, how China has leapfrogged, and now they're trying to do something against it. But here in China, the last 5 years, they wowed us a couple of times. And the only thing that wowed us from the other brands, international brands, might have been their ignorance.
I think this is, I think for everyone listening to this, I think this is something we really have to, I think let's sink in. Where you just said, you were wowed by the Chinese car, and the only thing that wows you from what you see from Western brands is ignorance. And I think we have to take that serious. We have to take this as a luxury industry, whether you are in automotive, whether you are in airlines, whether you are in fashion or in fine jewelry or so. One of you said before that the focus of Western brands is to see China as a market, where I feel that Chinese brands increasingly are best in class, probably best in the world, in putting the customer at the center, in becoming really client-centric. And I've been, publishing a lot over the last couple of years, but especially in the last couple of months, I brought a concept that I call the 4E of luxury, which is about emotion, it's about the customer experience, it's about engagement with the clients, but also about exclusivity. And everything you just described about the experience that you had in Shenzhen that are 10 times more expensive in some cases. And I think here what is happening is, and this I think also contributes to a lot of this trust crisis, is they see traditional car companies, if we now speak about cars, but we can, everything when we say in our car, we can basically exchange that word and put any other product category, because what we are seeing in disruption in cars is happening everywhere, in practically every product category. So we basically see now traditional brands being, let's say, really the word complacent, trying to preserve what they built, while Chinese companies think about, and I think you said it nicely, how can I make the life of a customer more beautiful, more easy? How can I wow them? how can I give them an experience where the little things matter? And where the traditional companies focus on product, from what I hear is the Chinese customers focus on the customer. And then create, of course, products that wow them, that show them things that they have not seen before at price points that if this would be a Western company, probably we could, if they can even build the technology, I would say the price points probably are going to be 2x, 3x, 4x. And I think this also creates, I think, a significant trust issue. What do you think?
So one more point to the prices. I have a friend who's very affluent, and last year he just told me that, it's the first car in my life that I bought for less than $100,000. But I love it. So, and this was like kind of eye-opening for me, because when you watch billionaires or millionaires, people with a lot of money, they don't really have to care about money, but nobody loves to waste money, right? And if they see I can get a product, a car, with the same or a better value for less money, I would for sure buy this car or this product. It's not that I have to spend at least $100,000 for a car, but when I see a car for $75,000, that could be, that gives me the value of a 120,000 car, I for sure would decide to buy this car. And I think this is what Damian's point also was. It's just $75,000. If somebody would tell you the retail price for this car is 120,000, you would accept it because you said, yeah, it makes sense. But then they can give the same value for a lower price.
And this goes then also to a sense of a sense of fairness, because if you basically experience this, like what your friend was saying, then you look at the offers in the market and say, wait a minute, what is actually happening here? Why are these companies charging so much?
Yeah.
And I think here we see also maybe, and it would be curious also to get your opinion on that. I would say not only a lack of maybe product and innovation, but maybe also a lack of storytelling in a way, because the what you said also from swapping technology to focusing on small details, this is all kind of part of a bigger picture. The neo houses that you mentioned also, they didn't just appear out of randomness. Someone really thought very, very thoroughly about what is the experience that someone should have? What is the story we want people to understand? So let's talk maybe a little bit, Damian, if you can share that, because I'm pretty sure you see this with your clients all the time, on storytelling and on the importance of storytelling for the Chinese market, especially when it pertains also to e-commerce and also social selling.
Sure. Yeah, storytelling was very important for us here since day one. The most maybe easy example that we could use would be a simple product detail page online or on social commerce, and we could compare that on what the brand would have on their standalone.com in the US, and then comparing that to what the Chinese customer is expecting to see in China on their, let's say, Tmall or JD Luxury Pavilion store. We've been having a presentation, and we do that quite frequently because still not everyone is aware of that. Where on the left-hand side, we're scrolling through the PDP of the .com page. It ends after 10 seconds. Yeah, some product specs, weight, let's say your watch, right? And then a little bit history of the brand and so on and so forth. And then in China, so we finished scrolling down after 3 seconds. And in China, we scroll down 30 seconds, 40 seconds. We scroll and we scroll and we find the history of the brand. We find the story of how it was created, of the owner, of the family, if it's a family business, right? We might have other prominent people who've been wearing it and how they wear to give the customer confidence. So there's a lot of storytelling which is expected, and the let's say the typical Chinese consumer, without generalizing it too much, I believe does expect to see more content and more story in order to trust the brand and in order to trust the product. And what we find in China, I think much more often compared to other countries, is that this actually also creates a hero product, because we see, okay, where is this company coming from? Yeah? Or why are you buying Belluti? Yeah? Is it because of the special leather? Right? Why do you buy Hermes? Why do you buy Dior? And what do you buy there? So there's customers who wouldn't buy the entire portfolio, right? They wouldn't buy a jacket. They wouldn't buy a jacket and a shoe and a handbag and a belt from the same company. If they know, hey, this company is very famous for how they do their shoes and how their leather looks like, right, and their handbags and whatsoever. So I think the customer here is very educated about the brands and about what they buy and where they spend their money, and then they don't want to know why are they spending the money, which means that the story and also history actually matters a lot.
Mm-hmm. I love this. I think this in my experience, I think this is also something that's very underestimated by brands. Every brand, in a sense, to look for growth. What are typically brands doing? They pivot from one category, maybe the category that made the brand relevant at some point, and then they add categories. They add accessories, they add other things. But to your point, customers basically are very aware, and I think also in the Chinese market increasingly are really aware of brands and of whom to trust for which use case. And they will not just buy blindly just because now that brand A adds bags or adds belts or adds these things. They will not just buy that from that brand blindly just because they bought something else. So I think this would it be safe to say from your experience that a lot of traditional brands, and this will be in the luxury context, probably mostly Western brands, that they underestimate the storytelling, the depth of storytelling, and maybe even, from what I hear, also go as far as maybe underestimate the client.
Yeah, I think so, and at least in the past, it has certainly been the case. But I do also believe, and I do also see that a lot of companies did figure out that the Chinese market works different, and they are doing a better job catering to those customers than they have done 10 years ago, right? Where you don't need to tell any story. People just would buy whatever you give them for whatever price, but that's changing. So I think they do take this more serious, so that is good. And it also means that, of course, international companies in China, they can adapt very well if they want to, and if they decide to do something about it and to listen. And there are those companies, and they are being successful. And there are other companies who have been steadily ignoring that, and they are either already out of China, lost completely, or losing a lot of market share, right? But I think the good news is that there's not only companies who's doing wrong, there's also companies who adapt to it, but generally yes, deeper storytelling, and maybe having knowing that there might be a focus in terms of product category, product and hero product, that this is normal in China. I think that is beneficial.
Yeah, but this also means that fundamentally, when we think about that, the everything that you guys discussed before, this extreme speed of change, the extreme dedication of local brands here to the customer, and also this high speed of clients shifting if they see there's something different. It also means, on one hand, it's good news that we know brands that adapt well are successful, but as you also said, there should be an incredible sense of urgency. Because I think from everything that I just heard, if a brand is not doing that, is not adapting, is continuing just with what they did before, they will be out of business here in no time. Is that correct? Would that be a correct assumption?
Absolutely. Absolutely right. They need to constantly adapt, constantly reconfigure how they're doing it and how that resonates with their clients. And of course, especially in the luxury industry, right? Be very mindful about cultural aspects, because the cultures are so different. European culture, US culture, and Chinese culture, it's so different that you do not want to make a cultural mistake.
Yeah, and this, so many brands have tapped into that thing, mostly unwillingly. I always like to say, if you see some brands that have been had spectacular crisis here in China. We don't necessarily need to name them, but the listeners will know who we talk about. I always like to say, most likely no one wanted to do the self-destruction, so to speak. Everyone always, the world is kind of full of people who fail with great intentions. Yeah. But I think we have to be aware that this cultural sensitivity is so critical, and it's difficult. Of course, it's difficult because if people can't speak the language, if people have a completely different lifestyle, if they live in places like, let's say, around the Lake Geneva, in New York City, in Paris, and so on, where everything that they see day in, day out is different, where there is not what you described before with your gym experience, with the dumbbell falling on the phone, where, you know, if a phone in Europe or in the US breaks, you take your credit card and go to the Apple Store and buy a new one. And here it's not so easy. No, here it's so digital, everything so dependent on that your entire life basically is over when you don't have this. So of course, if people live in a completely different reality, it's also natural. It's not so easy to adapt to that. So I think here we can see adaptation is important. This also means immersion is important. And similar to, you know, my decision to come here beginning of this year and to spend a few days here, have conversations like with the two of you and some others, and immerse myself for a few days fully into the lifestyle is so critical. And I wouldn't know how to manage my own business without being all the time in the different markets and seeing, you know, what is happening here, what is happening in Japan, what is happening in Paris, what is happening in Milan, what is happening in the US, and so on, because things are changing so fast. And if we are not basically paying attention to that speed of change, we will be out of business in no time. Thomas, I would like to build on something you said before with your friend. That was it was a wealthy friend that was so impressed by his new car. I get the question all the time about, you know, behaviors, expectations, and so on of very wealthy customers. And I'm sure that, you know, with what you are doing and also being exposed to a lot of brands, being probably invited to a lot of events, I think you have a quite good insights into that. So if you reflect a bit on what you know about wealthy Chinese or wealthy people who live here in China, what would you say are maybe a few things that are worth sharing with the luxury audience that they should know and respect or keep in mind about high net worth individuals in China?
Yeah, a very interesting thing about these very, very affluent customers in China, what I found out is that now they know that they can buy everything, they have the money to fulfill all their dreams. Then there's another thing coming to the surface. They want to have emotional value. You know, like in Europe, you have like this so-called old money, where you have like generations of generations who have the same background, who have the same education, who have the same friends. They know each other. They go to the same events. They go to the same clubs. They go to the same schools and universities. In China, we have a lot of first or second generations wealthy people. And they think, they find out, okay, in the end, it's not all about money. We also want emotional value, 情绪价值 in Chinese. So this means like we want a platform, we want to meet interesting people, we want to see the world, we want to be part of these really of these clubs where not just money can get you in, but you need connections, you need people. So I think this would be an interesting approach for luxury brands to say, okay, we have to deliver more than this products. We have to deliver emotional value to the customer. If you come to us, if you're part of our club, you can have things, you can have experiences, you can connections, you can have platforms that no money in this world can buy you, or no other brand can provide to you. So emotional value is one thing that they really need and they really crave for.
This is fascinating, and I think it's also something, again, when you think about what we said before about a rather product-centric mindset in the Western world, at least traditionally. and this very, very almost radically customer-centric and client-centric mindset in China of the brands. That also leads me to something, you know, that also we previously discussed a bit earlier, about maybe the emergence of Chinese brands in that sector. And to me, it's always interesting when I think about, as we spoke a lot about cars. Cars are somehow, I would say, is almost the ultimate category of expressing who you are to the world, because people see you in a car. It's for most people one of the most significant purchases they will do over their lifespan. It has always been linked to, in a sense, to success, to kind of a social ladder, because you can basically see how someone is doing well with the cars they drive. So there's a lot of correlation. And I always like to say, if in a category like cars, Chinese players can become not only, you know, just with a remarkable success, but even dominant in some categories in almost no time, then there is no safe category. There's no category where basically existing brands can just lay back and say it's never going to happen here. And we've seen there is emerging, you know, new wineries that are doing amazing wines. Some of the best wines in the world now are produced here in China. There are some jewelry brands that are doing incredible things here. There are some fashion brands that are doing incredible things. They are not necessarily so widely known yet outside of China, but it's a question of time until this is going to happen. So how do you see also the emerging competition from Chinese brands?
So one more point that is like related to all the things we mentioned before, and also your question right now. It's like when we're talking about why did businesses fail in China, or why did some ad campaigns fail or got like a huge shitstorm, I'm always thinking myself, why would people approve these ad campaigns, for example, that got a huge backlash on social media and traditional media, right? In China in the last 5 to 10 years, we had a couple of examples where this was failed, a really big fail. Because when I'm thinking, like, people will sit in a meeting room like this, and then there's one guy or a team presenting their idea. There must be Chinese colleagues, Chinese people who would say, if I see, as a customer, I see this ad campaign, it makes me feel a little bit unwell. How will the other customers react? But I think the biggest problem with this failed campaigns, failed businesses, it's not resources, it's not money. Most of the time, it's a cultural differences. And I would take a guess that these campaigns were mainly presented and started by Western or European colleagues. And there still is a difference where some Chinese colleagues would say, oh, maybe I'm not in the position to criticize them. I'm not in the position to say, I don't think this is a good idea. So I would rather not and say, yeah, it's okay, but then it's not my responsibility to stand up and be like maybe a party pooper, you know, to say in the meeting, I don't think this is a good idea. So, and it's the same with the customers, it's the same with the companies. We as the Western countries, we have to come down from our position to say we are smarter, we understand more, we have the longer history, especially in the luxury market. Yes, the Western brands, they have the longer history, but now it's a time to come down and to understand that we are on the same level, not just in a team with our Chinese colleagues. The Chinese customers are on the same level like the European customers, and also the Chinese brands are on their way to be on the same level. So what we need is understanding, what we need is respect, what we need is this cultural appreciation of the Chinese culture and the culture of all the other emerging countries in Asia.
I would add to that I think now luxury brands or industry, I think it will really depend on the product category, because as previously mentioned also, so Chinese customers, they care about the background, about the story, and see if it makes sense, right? So I don't see Chinese brands competing in something as magnificent as the sales model of the Birkin bag or of Nautilus or whatsoever, right? So China is not and will also never be, in my opinion, able to make great mechanical watches. That's Switzerland. And I think that will always be the same for expensive leather goods, that might also be the same. I think what now has already changed in the car industry, why it's been changing, is that the Chinese CEO, Germans, for example, they're good at engineering. We are the best engineers in the world. We were, and I think we still are. We still have this reputation. So for all of the products which have to do with sophisticated engineering, I still think Germany, Switzerland, we do have our edge. Now we're losing it in the automotive industry because the cars has nothing to do with German engineering anymore. We fail with that. The car is literally a battery and a smartphone on 4 wheels, but even more powerful than a smartphone, right? And all of the Chinese, they know about it, that everything with technology, hardware with technology, and even software, even though it sometimes comes from the US or from China, that China is the market leader, and they're very proud of it. And they do see that, hey, it's made in China anyways, a Chinese brand, they even understand our demands much better, so why shouldn't I buy it? And the product is better for a cheaper price. So this is a no-brainer that our traditional combustion engines, they are still being sold in China. No Chinese would buy a combustion engine, actually. Yeah, if you want to buy a sports car, you either go for a 911 or something like that, a luxury, or you go maybe now for the Xiaomi, which has done very great on the Nürburgring. Yeah? But then if you have other product categories, I think it won't work. There's a couple of categories, for example, where you think about China. In Inner Mongolia, we have fantastic cashmere. Yeah. So why wouldn't there be a Chinese luxury brand like adidas, right? Who compares themselves also to Loro Piana? Yeah. Cost maybe half the price or a third of it. Yeah, it's still not a cheap brand. You would still pay your 500 or 1,000 euros for a nice cashmere product, right? So it's still not cheap. It's not ultra luxury, yeah, but it's somewhere. If you say this is from Inner Mongolia, and maybe where's the best cashmere coming from? Yeah, or maybe from there potentially. So why shouldn't we the Chinese brand when it's a Chinese product? Same for the car. So I think it will depend on the product category, because people are not only paying and buying the product that you want them to buy, but they really think, why should I buy it? Huh? Swiss watch makes sense.
Yeah, it comes back to what you said before. It comes back to the why. It becomes also back to the emotional value that you mentioned. And also it comes back to what you mentioned before on that they are so sophisticated now that they really understand where to choose, which product to buy from this brand, which product to buy from that brand. So I think that the client centricity is so critical. So maybe to close our podcast, I would be very curious, maybe Damian, if you can start with that, since you work in the field of e-commerce and social selling. Tell us maybe, where do you see the future of luxury, and what are for you, if a brand would come to you and say, okay, we want to be successful in China and successful on the platforms that you're serving. What are a few two or three things you would want managers to know, and maybe to focus on? What would be for you critical success factors when you look into luxury today and luxury tomorrow in China?
Yeah, very good question. Very difficult also to answer. So I think you would just need to have your touch points all along the digital ecosystem in the Chinese environment, especially on platforms which are important for your customers. In luxury, that would be different platforms than in fast-moving consumer goods. So in luxury, you would have, of course, your Little Red Book, which is your Instagram. People share their stories there. About luxury lifestyle, about product experiences, about or whatever shopping experiences also outside the country and within the country. So that would certainly be one platform of the marketing mix. You would also want to have a very good presence on WeChat as kind of as your CRM tool. And then you would have your presence on potentially also on some e-commerce platforms like the Tmall or JD Luxury Pavilion, where you do not see usually you see how many items have been bought over the last couple of months or how many reviews you have. You, as a luxury brand, of course, you do not want that. So Tmall and JD, they do give you this option. Platforms like TikTok, Douyin are not yet so much something for luxury or ultra luxury products, at least not for selling. If you do have some videos there or some customer reviews, maybe yes, but not as a super high priority. And what I would hope for, that then the international companies and the executives would be open-minded to understand and know that China is different, and to see how to cope with that, and potentially be a little bit more digital, at least in the way of how to do marketing, than in the other countries. And of course, I would not expect that you could buy your Birkin bag online. That's simply not going to happen. And it's not meant to be. But generally, maybe for other brands, having a touch points along the value chain, which is super high quality and sophisticated, will eventually also drive more customers to the offline point of sales, in my opinion.
Wonderful, thank you. And Thomas, maybe for you, when you think about customers or people using social media right now, as you're really like the mastermind, so to speak, behind that, what would you advise companies to keep into consideration to be relevant on social media platforms in China? What are also for you kind of no-goes and kind of do's and don'ts? What should people take away?
So if we close the circle to what we said in the beginning, speak the language of your customer. Understand your customer, put money in customer research, ask people on the streets, so to say, what do they want? What do they want to hear? Don't be like you think you're smarter than your customer. You think they don't know. You have to educate them. Most of the time, we see customers educating brands with a shitstorm or a backlash to say, "Oh, okay, this was the wrong approach." So this is very important, and never underestimate the importance of social media, because we still see this. They have like some brands, not the bigger brands, but like small companies. They have one social media manager. They have like a small social media team. But in China, as we see it, we don't have social media anymore. In e-commerce, as two separate environments, we have social commerce. So on e-commerce platforms, you see people telling stories, you see people doing videos, you see people writing articles, and it's always interconnected. And this will be the same in the future in Europe, because we now see TikTok, Amazon, all the platforms are learning from China and coming. So how do you do it? Like the connection between social media and e-commerce. We also want to do it. We want to sell on our social media platforms. We want to publish content on our e-commerce platforms, because this is really, really important. So social media will always be there, and it will be always it will become more and more important. So yes, the devices will change. We will not use an iPad or an iPhone in 10 or 20 years maybe, but we always will be somehow interconnected as users and as users with the brand. And we want the brand to take us serious, to say, okay, I value you, I value your opinion, you are part of this community, you're part of this brand, and for this, social media is and will be the tool number one.
Wonderful. So this was an incredible podcast. As I said in the beginning, I was certain that we would get insights that I think the viewers and the listeners will find incredibly insightful and critical. But again, in the context of where we are, where so many brands right now are struggling, where you see also maybe the biggest divide. Some brands are growing double digits and other brands are declining double digits. Also this in the past, we never had this in that extreme. I think the insights that you both shared are invaluable. I learned a lot. I don't know when was the last time that during a podcast I'm writing, I don't know, 5 or 10 pages of things, and maybe just to recap a couple of things that we said today, because I think that they were so critical. We started the conversation. I think. You gave the insight about why this market was growing so fast, and why this was something that we could not expect continuing. And again, I think it's worth reminding that we don't have a crisis in luxury here in China. Yes, there's uncertainties for sure. There is the pressure on real estate valuations and so on. But also frankly, for people who own their real estate and who are not planning to sell right now, whether the valuations are a little bit higher or a little bit lower may impact customer sentiment. but they don't impact necessarily the disposable income of someone in a moment. So I never really bought into that argument as the main argument why we see the change in the market. But I think you explained extremely well that there's a fast adaptation of the post-COVID era where people can travel again, where people have a better understanding on price deltas across countries. I thought this was really fascinating what you shared, and I really love what you said is, we don't speak the same language anymore, and you was just reiterating it in the end. I think this is, to me, for brands really something. Let this sink in. We don't speak the same language anymore. We have to refocus on how customers are communicating among themselves, are also getting information, are getting inspired. And if we are not able to inspire the customers the way they do, of course, hallelujah, then it's going to be very clear what is happening. It's no rocket science that is there. So I thought this was extremely insightful. We discussed, I think, at length about shopping experiences and where maybe brands that are not perceived in a traditional way as luxury are wowing you away in your day-to-day experience here in China, where other brands that are much more traditional brands are sometimes a little bit getting meh experiences and not so incredible experience. I think what you said was your very wealthy friend, when he said he never bought a car that cheap, so to speak, that he was wowed so much for. Again, if anyone listening in the car industry listening to that, it's a wake-up call. I think we have to take talking points like these extremely serious. And I also found very, very insightful this observation that you feel from a perspective of working here, but also knowing, of course, the Western world extremely well. I found it super insightful how you said that your impression is that Chinese companies are incredibly observant what is going on in the world, and where Western companies often, I don't want to say don't care about China. China is too big not to care, but maybe care not with the same level of detail. Don't care maybe with the same obsession to learn. They care maybe more. I think you were saying this as China as a market, but not necessarily China as a learning case. And so on. Again, a huge opportunity to do so. Then we have this huge complexity of social media platforms that are evolving, and that, as you also described, are not just any more social media platforms, but become commerce platforms. And commerce platforms also means that there is so much more inspiration on those platforms, and selling becomes much more inspirational selling. And it was something we didn't touch so much on in today's conversation, but I'm pretty sure if people get more and more inspired online, they will also expect the same level of inspiration in the store. So this also has huge implications on how brands have to think about their in-store experience and their store experiences. So there were so many insights. You discussed about the growth of social selling and the decline in terms of share, at least, of traditional, if I even say traditional e-commerce platforms, like Alibaba losing shares. So I think very, very important also to take away. So my personal takeaway is this is, I would say, the most fascinating market in the world. It's so fascinating because we see the future here. We're experiencing the future here every day. There's no market, and I'm traveling so extensively. I was last year probably in 30 different countries, 5-6 times in Asia, 7-8 times in Europe. I was in the Middle East. I was in several African countries. So I really see the world almost in real time. No other place is as fascinating, as fast, as intensive, as changing as this place. And this means also for companies, the way how we have to think about China has to change, has to basically this warp speed in which things are changing. They require people to reflect a bit different, to be faster, to adapt, to become much more proactive, to not just think, I'm seeing this right now, let's copy this. No, this is because whoever you will copy today, they are already working on 1 or 2 next generations of products. So whatever you bring then out, copying what is the status quo today, is not going to be competing with the products that the Chinese companies will have
in 1 or 2 or 3 years. And to me also, it's one of the last things you were saying about that each country has their expertise areas. I think this is also, to me, one of the, potentially also the ways out for Western companies. Refocus on what you're really good at. Be aware of what you're good at. If you're extremely good in engineering, then innovate around engineering. If you're extremely good in leathers, innovate around leathers. Show the world something they have not seen before. Take everything, the art that you have, take it to the next level, and so on. So I think here, to me, there is a lot of warning signs of what you're seeing for traditional brands, but also a lot of hope. And I think if brands do it right, they can be extremely successful in this market. It's a market with around 1.4 billion people. It's a market that is growing also in terms of wealth, still quite remarkable. And it's a market that definitely is much more difficult to be successful in today than it was 5 or 10 or 15 years ago. But this should never discourage anyone to be here, but it should be, I would say, an encouragement. So before we close, how can people reach you if they want to be successful in this market? Maybe if both of you can share a bit what are the best channels to reach you. And then, of course, we are going to share this also in the show notes.
So for me, the best thing is to look my name up at LinkedIn. I think everyone listening to this podcast has LinkedIn. My name is Thomas, Thomas, Derksen, Derksen, and then you will find me.
Wonderful.
Yeah, perfect. Well, LinkedIn is a good channel to reach me too. And otherwise, just drop me an email. My name, Damian.Maib at genuine-asia.com. And usually I get through them.
Wonderful. Yeah, we will share this also. Again, both of you, thank you so much for hosting me here today. And on a day with wonderful sunshine here in Shanghai, very close to the Bund. And it was a huge pleasure and privilege having you. Great insights that were shared, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you very much, Daniel.